Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, 5 Keys to an Integrative Approach to Lyme. And I promise today you will learn what it means to adopt an integrative approach to chronic Lyme disease and be given some ideas and tools to be successful in doing so. I'm so excited that you joined me today. I thank you for spending that time with me, and I really have some great information for you coming up in this webinar. So you're in the right place if you realize that Lyme is a very complex illness and want to make sure you're covering all the bases that need to be covered. You're in the right place if you struggle to know where to gather all that information and who or what is a reliable and credible source of information. You spend your nights asking Dr. Google a myriad of questions, reading pages and pages of information online, and still being completely overwhelmed by it all. And perhaps you love your Lyme literate medical doctor or Lyme literate practitioner and are very happy with the care you're receiving, but you just know there's more that you can be doing with diet and lifestyle factors at home. So let's look at what we're going to cover today. The snapshot is, what is an integrative approach? What does that actually mean? What is an integrative approach to Lyme and why it's so important? 5 keys to an integrative approach to Lyme. Tips and strategies for success. And I'm going to give you some information about Lyme Ed, which is a new online program that I have created that outlines in detail how to do an integrative approach to Lyme disease, covering everything from nutrition, detoxification, naturopathic approaches, factors that hold back recovery, how to really live with Lyme long term and what that means, and some bonuses, including how to utilize essential oils in treatment protocols and the potential benefits of CBD in Lyme disease. Now, for those of you that hang until the end and listen to the whole webinar, I have a special gift for you, and that is my guide, 15 Tips for Minimizing Herxheimer Reactions. Before we get into it, let me introduce myself. My name is Nicola Ducharme. I'm a naturopathic doctor. I'm the owner and medical director of Restore Medicine, which is an integrative medical center in San Diego, California. I'm owner of the Naturopathic Mama, and I love to write and blog on a variety of health topics, including chronic illnesses like Lyme. I'm author of 4 books, The Lyme Diet, The Beginner's Guide to Lyme Disease in Australia, and Lyme Brain. And I feel very honored to be also a chapter contributor for both Connie Strasham's book, where she interviews experts in the field of Lyme disease and writes about their different approaches. And now I'm also creator of Lyme Ed, and that is online programs to support patients and practitioners in the treatment of chronic Lyme disease. So let's dive in. So what does an integrative approach actually mean? Well, integrative medicine by definition is healing-oriented medicine that takes account of the whole person, body, mind, and spirit, including all aspects of lifestyle. It recognizes the importance of the therapeutic relationship between doctor and patient and makes use of all appropriate therapies, both conventional and alternative. There are some principles that underlie integrative medicine. It's a partnership between patient and practitioner in the healing process. And I'm really big on this. I really feel that when I'm working with patients, we are a team. We are in partnership. It's not me just telling people what to do at all. It's appropriate use of conventional and alternative methods to facilitate the body's innate healing response. Consideration of all factors that influence health, wellness, and disease, including mind, spirit, and community, as well as body. It's a philosophy that neither rejects conventional medicine nor accepts alternative therapies uncritically. It's recognition that good medicine should be based in good science, be inquiry-driven, and open to new paradigms. It involves use of natural, effective, less invasive interventions whenever possible. Use the broader concepts of promotion of health and the prevention of illness, as well as the treatment of disease. And the training of practitioners to be models of health and healing, committed to the process of self-exploration and self-development. So when we put that into the context of Lyme, an integrative approach is a whole body approach, including every system and process, and recognizing the way they work together. It blends conventional or Western medicine with more natural approaches, and recognize the important role of lifestyle factors like nutrition, stress, toxicity, and so on. So one of the challenges is that conventional medicine, we also call it Western medicine or allopathic medicine, very much divides the body into systems. And this is done throughout the training process of MDs today. We have a neurologist who looks at the nervous system. The rheumatologist looks at bones, joints, connective tissue. The psychiatrist studies the brain. An endocrinologist looks at hormones and glands. The problem with Lyme disease is it can't be split into those segments or those systems because it is an illness that affects the whole body. And as such, it needs a whole body approach. So let's go on and look at the 5 keys, or not the 5 keys. These are not just the 5 keys, but these are 5 things that strike me as crucial to adopting an integrative approach to chronic Lyme disease. So the first is having a multi-modality approach. Now, there's a whole slew of different modalities and therapies and treatments that are available to us these days, and different people will have different access based on where they are and where they're living and their environment and community, etc. But just some examples: dietary modification, herbal medicine, homeopathy, antibiotics, nutritional supplementation, home-based detox tools like coffee enemas and dry skin brushing and Epsom salts baths, energy-based therapies like Reiki, frequency-based therapies such as Rife machines, oxygen-based therapies like hyperbaric oxygen and ozone, essential oils, IV therapies, IV vitamin C, phosphatidylcholine, Myers cocktails, hydrogen peroxide, neural retraining programs, neurofeedback, and even stem cell therapy. So it could be easy to say, well, that's all very well, but I couldn't possibly take on those expensive procedures and I can't get to a practitioner that does them. But they're not all in-office expensive procedures. There's a lot that you can do at home at very little cost and with quite little effort or time commitment, I would say. Things like coffee enemas may take 20 to 30 minutes a day. Nutrition modifications, you have to eat and prepare meals and buy your food. So once you feel more confident in how to modify your diet, then it doesn't necessarily take any extra time to do so. Things like rectal ozone may be a little bit more involved, but still not nearly the cost of going to have ozone therapy in a doctor's office. So whatever the things you choose and whatever the things you do, the key is detox, detox, detox. So I would recommend prioritizing detoxification therapies and modalities, especially early on in your treatment, to get your body ready for antimicrobial therapy and just to keep you healthy and sustain that healthy response throughout treatment. So how would you know what modalities are going to be best for you? Well, there are some questions you can ask yourself that might help guide you. Are you going to work with diet predominantly and you don't want to take too many supplements? A lot of patients don't tolerate a lot of supplements early on. And so the nutrition modifications are a good way to calm inflammation and get the ball rolling. Do you tend to tolerate energetic approaches more than herbs or supplements? Are you more likely to be compliant with liquid tinctures or tablets and capsules? This is a big one. I see some people just love their herbs and squirt them all in a glass of water and down the hatch. And other people find that's just not their style and they'd rather have capsules. What financial limitations or allowances do you have for your treatment? What providers do you have in your area? And do you believe in the therapy and have faith that it will help you? And this is an interesting one and an important one, because I often say to people, if you don't want to do a certain therapy, if you don't think it's going to help you, then don't do it. No matter what it is, if it's antibiotic therapy or detox support, there's some things I would sort of put my foot down a little bit. Like if you're going to do antibiotics, I want you on probiotics, and that's slightly all there is to it. But other things, I feel that it helps people to have faith in what's going on. And I'm not saying that we're just looking for the placebo effect either, but I do feel like we need to be in alignment with the therapies that we choose. The big one is to antibiotic or not to antibiotic. And that's a question that's going to come up in everybody's treatment protocol and plan along the way. And people often ask me if they can get well using natural therapies only and not do any antibiotics at all. And I've said this before, and I stand by this today, and I certainly understand that other practitioners and other people may disagree with me and may have a completely different experience. But my opinion has always been that it's tough to get well just using herbal protocols. I do see people getting well all natural. So I'm not saying that antibiotics are necessary for everybody. But I'm just saying, if you're treating all naturally, try to incorporate as many different modalities as you can manage. So maybe if you're going to do herbal therapies, you might consider doing Rife therapy as well, or Rife therapy along with other detox therapies or ozone therapy. So we can mix and match. You don't have to go off and do everything on the list, but mix and match 2 or 3 different therapies. And in my view, that will give you a better chance of recovering without using antibiotics, if that's what you choose to do. I do still utilize antibiotics a lot in my practice, but I don't view them as the only approach. I use them as part of an integrative approach. And I try to use, as little as possible for as short a duration as possible, while still affecting the change that we need to affect. I personally think that antibiotics are somewhat better in the early phases of treatment. And I don't mean right out the gate when somebody hasn't even started their sort of detoxification support or anything like that. But I tend to see people doing better when we knock that microbial load down early and then try to get them off antibiotics and onto other things as soon as possible. And I will say, in my practice, I've loved essential oils for this purpose. I feel that I can get people off antibiotics sooner, and the essential oils can really have a strong antimicrobial effect to take over that role. So the long-term approach, though, is really and truly healing the body, regulating immune function, and repairing the collateral damage that Lyme can cause. So the effects on the hormone system, for example, the effects on the digestive system, we need to really and truly heal the body on a deep level and allow it to function in its optimal way. And just doing antibiotic therapy, in my view, doesn't meet that need. We also need to evaluate treatment priorities and see where to start. You simply can't do everything at once, and that just would become very overwhelming and very expensive, and frankly, not probably the best thing for your body anyway. So it's just a good way to start evaluating the priorities and choosing a path and sticking with it for a period of time. So key number 2 is treating Lyme as a multi-system, multifaceted illness. So we've talked about a range of modalities. Now we're going to look at a range of treatment priorities. And we know that chronic Lyme is so much more than an infectious illness. It affects every system of the body. So it's so much more than just killing bacteria. That is really just sort of an insufficient approach. And we need to address a range of things that need to be repaired and balanced. So I'll talk about a few of them a little bit further on, but we already mentioned hormones can get really out of whack. Digestive system can get out of whack. Neurotransmitters can get out of balance. And we just need to make sure that our treatment is incorporating enough of those things and putting out the fires as we go so that we can rebuild the body, not just simply kill off infection. So hormone dysregulation, I mean, I see adrenal issues all the time. Low cortisol levels, adrenal burnout, and that can create so many symptoms of its own. Thyroid problems I see all the time. And again, supporting the thyroid can make a world of difference. Reproductive hormones get out of whack. The neurotransmitter imbalances, that's our brain chemicals like serotonin and GABA, that can create a whole lot of anxiety and depression. Mitochondrial issues impact the energy production because they actually are the little powerhouses of the cell that produce our ATP. So that can lead into massive fatigue. We have toxicity from a number of sources. We have the Herxheimer reaction just from the die-off of pathogens. We have potentially heavy metal toxicity, mycotoxins, and the list goes on. Toxins from candida, ammonia, and aldehydes. So that's a big part too. We have inflammatory processes, which is a natural part of immune activation. Anytime we have chronic infection, we will have an immune response. And with an immune response, we will have inflammation. And that's the body's design. That's not necessarily the bad part. The bad part is when it becomes chronic, that it can really play such havoc. And autoimmune processes, I see that a lot in my Lyme patients, that Lyme can trigger autoimmunity. So some people really have a diagnosis of lupus or Sjogren's, and I'm not necessarily saying that that diagnosis is incorrect, don't get me wrong, but I do see cases where my Lyme patients have been diagnosed with an autoimmune issue, maybe an elevated RA factor or ANA, thyroid antibodies, gluten intolerance, things like that. And Lyme could really be an underlying cause of that. So I see a lot of autoimmune thyroid, for example, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, see that a lot in my Lyme patients, and a lot of gluten-related autoimmunity. And of course, the gluten and the thyroid have been shown to be interconnected. So if one is gluten intolerant, which is an autoimmune problem, it will predispose to autoimmune thyroid issues. So all of these factors can contribute to the most common symptoms of Lyme: the fatigue, the anxiety, depression, insomnia, pain, cognitive issues, neurological symptoms. The list goes on. If you're listening to this and you're in the world of chronic Lyme, you know that that's just the tip of the iceberg of what people can experience. So, we've got to look at the triad. We've got the actual infections themselves. We've got the secondary impact on the systems of the body. And then we have the other underlying causes that can be playing a role. And so our treatments, to be truly integrative, have to factor all of those three things in. So key number 3, do everything within your control to assist the process. So there's a ton you can do within your own life and in your own home to assist the recovery process. These things are often free or pretty inexpensive and don't require the guidance of a medical practitioner. Now, I encourage everyone with chronic Lyme to be under the care of a medical practitioner, but I also encourage you to stop and look, take inventory of the little things you can do on your own. They may not seem like a really big deal, and they may seem like they're not going to contribute that much given the magnitude of how chronic Lyme can feel. But believe me, the little things do add up. They add up in the benefits to your body, but they also add up in just shifting that, giving you that little bit of empowerment. I realize how debilitating and how disempowering chronic Lyme disease can be. So just feeling like you're doing little things here and there to care for yourself and contribute to your own healing, I think is key. So just some examples: dietary modifications. Nutrition is really key in reducing immune activation and inflammation in the body. I cannot tell you how many of my patients have just been transformed by dietary modifications. The big things for me, and if you've read my Lyme diet book, you know this by now: gluten-free, sugar-free, and preferably dairy-free. Gluten and dairy are some of the most inflammatory foods around. And sugar not only feeds candida, but it's immune suppressive as well. 1 teaspoon of sugar can suppress immune function for up to 16 hours. which is quite frightening. You need your immune system working for you. So you don't want to be suppressing it with eating refined sugars, and you don't want to be fueling it with inflammatory responses by doing too much gluten and dairy. In terms of natural sugars, for example, eating fruit, that is very dependent on candida levels and how careful you need to be around that as to what's going to be appropriate for you. Modifying your lifestyle as much as possible to allow time and energy for healing. And I realize there's a big range here too. Some people are home and cannot work and are bedbound or couchbound pretty much all day. But there are a lot of people with chronic Lyme who are still out there working full-time jobs and have very hectic schedules and just have to make it work. So my caution is that burning the candle at both ends is not conducive to healing. The more you can modify your lifestyle, maybe cut back the work schedule somewhat, just make sure not to get absolutely overcommitted with family commitments, certainly not overdoing exercise. These things all just give your body a little bit more time and a little bit more rest, which is what it needs to heal. Adopting stress management techniques like meditation or journaling or gentle yoga if you can. These things can all just help put your body in a parasympathetic stress response. So we know our sympathetic nervous system or sympathetic response is fight or flight. And that's sort of our panic mode. That's our emergency operating source. But a lot of people are stuck in that. And, chronic pain will feed that and chronic illness will feed that. And I understand that that's not your choice, nor is it your fault. But the more we can help our body just nudge back into that parasympathetic response, that's our rest and digest. That's where you need to be for true healing to occur. Sleep hygiene is a big one. So again, I understand a lot of people with chronic Lyme have terrible insomnia, and they said, we'd do everything in our power to sleep if we could, but you just have to look at doing what you can. So adopting a healthy ritual around sleep, having the same sort of pattern and the habits that you do every night to try and put your body into that mode where it realizes it's time to wind down and go to sleep. Trying to get as much sleep before midnight if possible. And here's a really big one: removing phones, wireless devices, and even plug-in alarm clocks to reduce EMFs in the bedroom. I've had quite a significant number of patients who report doing better and sleeping better when they get the EMFs down in their bedroom, certainly, and sometimes even the house. I know some people do well turning the Wi-Fi off, turning the router and all of that stuff, all the computers shut down at night, all the phones off, the routers turned off, and just really trying to minimize that exposure. I have seen that make a big difference for quite a few people. Utilize home-based detox therapy. So dry skin brushing, for example, once you've spent the $7 or $8 on a dry skin brush, then it's free and you can do it a couple of times a day to help your lymphatic system. Epsom salts baths are another good one. Coffee enemas are another good one. They take a little time and energy and effort, but I have, again, a myriad of patients who report how much better they feel when they're doing coffee enemas. So key number 4 is being on the lookout for other factors that might hinder your recovery. So part of this is the responsibility of your practitioner, frankly, to kind of put the picture together and to tease out what are the underlying causes and stresses and factors. So this is not 100% your responsibility, but it is good to be aware of things that can hinder your recovery and investigate them. Even just thinking through things that you could bring to your practitioner to ask their opinion about. I think my top example here is mold toxicity. This is one of the biggest things that holds people back. The symptoms absolutely overlap with chronic Lyme, so it's really hard to tell them apart. And to make it worse, the genetic factors that predispose to one will predispose to the other. So just have a think back of where you've lived. Think if you've ever been in a water damaged building or seen signs of mold in your house or your school or workplace. A lot of people don't think about that. They just think, oh no, we've never had mold in the house. Of course, the hard part is that mold isn't always visible. And so sometimes it's elusive for that reason too. But if there's any suspicion, ask your doctor or practitioner to run a mycotoxin test or seek out a mold specialist who can help you evaluate that. I see it all the time. People living in moldy houses have a very hard time recovering from Lyme. And even people who've been exposed to mold in the past, it still needs to be dealt with. Those mycotoxins can still be in the body and getting in the way. Other things you might look at: toxins like heavy metal toxicity, looking at the history of vaccines as they can contain mercury and aluminum. Amalgam fillings contain mercury. Eating lots of seafood in the diet. I would also add, from a lead standpoint, we want to be careful about old pipes and sources of like old lead-based paint and things of that nature. Looking at other toxicities from polluted water, for example, areas of heavy spraying with pesticides. I just started working with a patient a couple of weeks ago who was from a town where they had massive water pollution from a chemical spill. And a lot of people were suffering with various health complaints after that. You want to look at your environment at home and see if you're in a toxic home environment. Personal care products and cleaning stuff and laundry stuff and fabric softeners and those scent things that you plug in the wall. I mean, they are actually very, very toxic. And a lot of people don't think about that. But you may want to look at just sorting through and trying to get more non-toxic products in the house for your cleaning stuff, for your personal care products, for your beauty regimen, skincare, things of that nature. And then I add here toxic relationships. I've seen this a lot too. When people are embroiled in these toxic relationships, it's hard for them to get well. I see that. And so sometimes it's an impossibility to absolutely, change the whole relationship or change the living environment or change the dynamic completely, but just being aware and maybe looking at counseling, or just maybe looking at ways that you can separate yourself somewhat from that individual or protect yourself a little bit from that individual, because it can impact your health. Infection-related factors. I mean, co-infections. I see this when some people come in and they've been treated for sort of quote unquote Lyme, but not treated for any of the co-infections. And so, they may be still having problems because they've had a co-infection getting in the way that wasn't addressed. Biofilm. Are you addressing biofilm? Bugs can be stuck in there, so the antimicrobials just can't get to them. It's important to be doing biofilm agents at some point throughout your treatment. Are parasites a problem? I'm hearing more and more stories from patients about seeing worms and parasites and things like that. So I find coffee enemas will certainly start clearing those, and that's usually what alerts people to the fact that they have them. And there's great anti-parasite herbs and sometimes even medications to help eradicate them and clear them out too. So a few things you might want to ask your practitioner to look at: adrenal testing. I always think salivary cortisol testing is best because we get to see the levels at morning, noon, afternoon, and night. And that's more helpful than just getting a single morning collection. Pyroluria testing, which relates to certain B vitamins and magnesium and zinc in the body. Methylation testing. Do you have the genetic defects on some of those methylation genes that will impact your ability to detoxify and your immune function and your neurotransmitter production? Heavy metal testing. I liked doing a provoked urine test for that, just to see if heavy metals might be in the way. And certainly mycotoxin testing, I try and do as frequently as possible. Key number 5 is recognizing the emotional and energetic aspects of the illness and trying to address them. So I fully recognize many Lyme patients have had a long and painful journey, not only with their illness, but with their experience with the medical community. I've heard horror stories about what people have been through and what they've been subjected to and the experience they've had along the way, and not being listened to and being ridiculed and yelled at and thrown out of doctors' offices. And the list goes on. And I understand this can lead to a huge range of emotions: anxiety, depression, despair, anger, resentment, bitterness, distrust. I get it. That is very natural and very understandable. And at the same time, staying stuck in those places will not facilitate healing. And I believe Dr. Robert Bransfield is a genius, and he's probably the prominent Lyme literate psychiatrist today. And he talks about post-traumatic stress disorder, and he fully believes, and I believe it too, that Lyme patients can have post-traumatic stress disorder from their experience. But it's very important to seek out professional help and to get help processing and releasing these experiences. So a lot of people have painful parts of their journey within their illness. And then, of course, there's many people who have painful histories outside of their illness experience. So there's a sort of double-edged sword here. And I do feel that, that it's important to look at that and try to get help with both of those aspects. One of the things I really love is Annie Hopper's work with limbic system retraining. And her work demonstrates that if prior traumas and negative thought patterns and emotions get stuck, they can impact the limbic system of the brain, which can then have far-reaching effects, including physical symptoms. So her program involves retraining the limbic system and releasing those stuck points in the neural pathway, and that then facilitates healing. So Annie Hopper has a dynamic neural retraining program, and I have seen that work beautifully, not only for people who have significant emotional traumas or emotional stuckness that they need help unraveling, but also just purely from a physical standpoint, a physical symptom standpoint. A lot of people with multiple chemical sensitivities, chronic Lyme, mold toxicity, things like that. There's also other ways to work through those sort of those emotional things that we carry around. I mean, psychotherapy, talk therapy, counseling, cognitive behavioral therapy, family therapy. A lot of times family dynamics get really pretty messed up when at least one member of the family has chronic Lyme. And so just helping to get the whole family in sync, I think, can be very, very helpful. Neurofeedback, I love, and I've loved that for many years now. EMDR, I think, is a good one for releasing past traumas. Emotional freedom technique is a wonderful technique that's very easy to do at home. It can be done multiple times through the day just to take the edge off periods of anxiety or negative thoughts that come up. Annie Hopper's dynamic neural retraining, and then also energy balancing therapies like Reiki, I've seen work beautifully in Lyme patients. So the important thing here is to recognize that negative thoughts and emotions can be toxic to the body. And there's a whole field that I find fascinating called neuroplasticity. And it's this research that shows that the thoughts we have dictate how our neural pathways develop. So if we repeatedly have positive thoughts, then those positive neural pathways will strengthen. If we have negative thoughts, we'll strengthen those neural pathways too. And I think that's just so impactful, and I think potentially so empowering, because we then get to choose. If we have a positive thought that's a little dirt track and we've just got this sort of very, rocky, bumpy dirt track, but we keep choosing the positive thought, that dirt track is going to widen and it's going to become a footpath. And then it's going to widen some more as we keep reinforcing the thought pattern. And then it's going to become a single lane road. And we keep choosing the thought pattern. And then it'll come a 2-lane road. And eventually it's going to be this super highway that has absolute place in your brain because you have reinforced that pathway over and over again. And the interesting thing is we can choose to do that with positive thoughts, or we can choose to do it with negative thoughts. And it's absolutely up to us which way we go. So I think that's important just to know that even if the thought doesn't come naturally to you, even if you have to make yourself think it, there is still value to choosing to think it and just not letting the negative thoughts kind of run in the background and take a hold. I know a lot of us do look to family and friends for support, but I hear this a lot, in the Lyme world, it's so difficult because people who aren't experiencing it simply can't truly understand. And I think a lot of them try to, and a lot of them mean well, and a lot of them do what they can. But I think that seeking out professional help can be a really big piece and can help a lot of people. So now let me share with you some tips for success in adopting this integrative approach that I think are really relevant. So the first is don't get overwhelmed. And that may be sort of easy for me to say. And I know there's so much information and so many different options and different treatments and everything like that. But try to remember that you can't treat every single element all at once. Okay, so we've talked about a few things today, looking at heavy metals, looking at adrenals, looking at methylation. It's impossible or near impossible to do absolutely everything at once. So I think just remembering that can be helpful. Lyme is so complex. There are so many bases to cover. Like I said, it's not just about treating a bacteria with an antimicrobial medication or an antimicrobial herb. There's so much more complexity to it. Making gradual changes, I think, is really important. So choosing one nutritional change to implement each week, for example. One week, you may start having protein smoothies for breakfast. The next week, make sure that all your dinners are gluten-free. The next week, you're going to choose something else. Make sure to be in bed before 10 p.m. even each night, even if you're not falling asleep at 10 p.m. each night. Just get your body in that habit. And then brainstorm different wish lists of treatments or modalities or priorities and just work through them gradually. Tackle one thing at a time. Try one thing at a time. I encourage people not to jump around too much, going from, I'll try this for 2 weeks. If I'm not better, I'll hop over here and try this for 2 weeks. And then I'll hop over here and see this other person. I think it's important to find a course of action that makes sense to you and really just stay the course, and I'm not saying if months go by and you're not having any progress that you don't look for something else. But I would make sure to give 2 to 3 months to give something a really fair run. I would suggest pacing yourself as well. So Lyme treatment is a marathon, not a sprint. What's interesting here is some people I hear say, oh, I just want to treat really aggressively. I just want to get through it and get to the other side. I'm fine with herxing. I just want to do it. I want to be done with this treatment and get back to my life, which of course is understandable. But it can actually cause bigger setbacks than just going the slow and steady route. So it's the hare and the tortoise kind of approach. Different people have different factors that play into how gradually or how aggressively they want to treat. I had one gal who had 4 months at home and then was starting college. So she wanted to go harder in the beginning because she had time to not work and not study and rest and feel, less than great if she was having Herxheimer reactions. Other people are working single moms and they can't fall apart. They just have to just go slow and steady to make sure they can cope with everything they need to cope with in life. But I have found that sometimes going too fast out of the gate actually will set us back further. If Herxheimer reactions get really overwhelming, or, something else could happen where it throws a depression into a suicidal kind of state. There's lots of different things that could happen. But I have found that being methodical is really important and not rushing and doing too much too soon. Trying not to compare with others. So comparison is truly the thief of joy. Remember that everyone's on a different journey. So now we have this world of the internet and this world of social media. And most people I talk to who are on the Lyme journey have some connection in Facebook groups or support groups or, internet forums or whatever the case may be. And I don't think that's all bad. I think it's great to get support. I think it's great to be well read and informed and to educate yourself. Where I see that it can get tough is that a lot of people end up comparing themselves to other people. They're looking at other people's treatment protocols, their plans, their therapies, their recovery. And I mean, some of the times it's just hard not to get completely freaked out with some of the things that you read online. I have a lot of patients who get very fearful because they read other people's symptoms and the severity of their illness, and they get completely terrified that they're going to end up in that same place when maybe their symptoms currently are less severe. And just reading about other people's experiences with treatments and things like that. So I think it's not a bad thing to be online, and everybody has their different sort of thresholds of this. I find some people I talk to, some of my patients are like, oh no, I can't handle it. I can't go into the forums because I just end up kind of, in a bad place mentally. And some people love it for the support and the interaction and the connection. So I'm just saying that I would just put a warning out that if you start comparing yourself with others, it's a slippery slope, and it can lead to a lot of unhappiness and discontent, and everyone's different. So no two people are going to respond to the same thing the exact same way. No two people have the exact same genetic makeup. No two people have the exact same circumstances. I mean, everyone's a snowflake. Everybody's individual. So, and remember too, for your practitioners, if they're, doing the right thing, should be putting together a plan that's individualized to you. So the plan they put together for you may be absolutely chalk and cheese from the patient they see right after you. And just remember that too, that treatment protocols and what's given to one person might not be given to the next person. But that's really, from a practitioner standpoint, because we're trying to individualize your treatment plan and tailor it for you in the way that we think is best for you in that moment. And then be kind to yourself. Self-care is key. Choose life-affirming thoughts, words, and actions. And this kind of ties back to the neuroplasticity that I was talking about a few minutes ago. The power of the mind is tremendous. So it's crucial to choose positive thoughts to strengthen those neural pathways. Live in abundant gratitude for what you have, not in scarcity or fear for what you have lost. And I know, again, you might be sitting there thinking, well, that's easy for you to say, but I've been working with Lyme patients and treating Lyme for 15 years, and I've seen so many people who I feel have facilitated their journey, have sped up their healing journey because they're committed to thinking positive. They're committed to being grateful to what they have. So I've seen this make a difference. This isn't me just kind of waxing poetic. I've really seen this make a difference in people. And believe that your body has an innate capacity to heal. And our job collectively, your practitioners and you, our job is to remove the obstacles to healing. And obviously, chronic infection is one of the obstacles to healing. So we want to remove that. But we also want to work on removing whatever other obstacles we find that could be getting in the way. So where are you in your journey? And how are you feeling about it? Do you know that there's more you could be doing to contribute to your healing? Maybe you want to do more, but you aren't sure what to do. Are you ready to get empowered and learn how to help yourself? Do you want one place that brings it all together in bite-sized, manageable pieces? Then Lyme Ed is for you. So Lyme Ed is an online program for all things relating to integrative approaches to chronic Lyme. It's a program that I've spent the last 18 months creating to help you navigate the complexities of chronic Lyme, with 10 modules and over 20 hours of teaching, giving you specifics of how to treat chronic Lyme disease comprehensively. When I first started working with Lyme disease, this is going back to 2005, I shied away from learning the antibiotic regimens. I was trained as a naturopathic doctor, and that all just felt too foreign and too overwhelming and not aligned with sort of what I wanted to do in my medical practice. And thankfully, I had some great MDs and mentors in my network that I could refer out to. But as the years went by, I learned more about the antibiotic protocols, and I was able to incorporate them into the work I was doing with my own patients. And now I feel like I've got this sort of ability to draw on the best of both worlds and have a good understanding of how the two go together. And I'm very blessed here in California that I am able to prescribe antibiotics, but I have 8 years of time in between undergrad and naturopathic medical school, 8 years of training in natural medicine. And I love that I have that perspective on bringing those two worlds together. And I have found that people love that and want an integrative approach that sort of meshes conventional and alternative medicine. So I've loved being able to offer that to my patients. But now what I've done is taken 15 years of experience working with Lyme and condensed everything I know into an easy to follow, clearly structured online program. With the program, you get lifetime access, so you have a reliable source of information to keep coming back to. So my goal here is to offer you the information you need to make informed decisions about how to make sure your own Lyme treatment is as comprehensive and encompassing as it needs to be. I'm so passionate about educating and supporting both patients and practitioners in the treatment of chronic Lyme disease. Lyme treatment is so individual. It's impossible and unrealistic to self-treat everything. And yet it's hard to find practitioners who are really well-versed in integrative approaches. And we already know it's super duper complex. So having a resource to keep coming back to learn and reinforce that information is key. So I want to give you an overview of what's included. Like I said, there's 10 modules. There's over 20 hours of teaching, actually closer to 25 hours of teaching. So module 1, we look at the understanding Lyme disease. So what is Lyme disease? I look at it as 3 different levels. Is Lyme strictly an infection with Borrelia burgdorferi, which is kind of its textbook definition? Do we define Lyme as a tick-borne illness, incorporating not only Borrelia species, but other co-infections as well? Or do we really need to look at it as a multi-system inflammatory and immune disorder? And I look here at things, what's really going on behind it. It's infection, it's inflammation, it's immune suppression, and it's chronic toxicity. And that's just the infection piece itself. That's not even the collateral damage that we know it can cause. So then we look at some of the collateral damage and what that is. I do give a brief history of Lyme disease. I give the epidemiology of Lyme disease. And I will talk for a little bit in this first module about some of the political issues in Lyme disease, not because we want to get stuck in all of that, but because they do shape the experience of patients today and what treatments are available and how practitioners are treating today. We also look at different routes of transmission, different vectors, the possibility of sexual transmission, congenital Lyme, and transmission through breast milk. So module 1 is a lot of background information. I also talk about some of the complicating factors in Lyme disease, such as bacterial strains, bacterial forms, co-infections, and biofilm. So module 2 is all about diagnosis. So we look at the symptoms of Lyme. We look at the different stages of Lyme disease. I talk about, is Lyme an autoimmune issue, or is it purely a chronic infection issue? Talking about signs and symptoms of Lyme and co-infections, the different ways to test for Lyme and for co-infections. And I give hints in knowing which test to run and how to optimize the results, knowing that no Lyme test is perfect and that Lyme is notoriously hard to find on testing. Looking at optimizing how to make the most of your testing. And then I give you guidelines on what other tests to consider. And we've talked about some of those variables today with the adrenals and methylation, etc. Module 3 is all about the allopathic treatment of Lyme disease. So we go through some general considerations of antibiotic therapy. We look at the ins and outs, to antibiotic to not to antibiotic. What are the pros and cons of each? What's realistic to expect? We talk about Herxheimer reactions and what they are. We talk about the side effects of antibiotics and the different interactions of different medications. And then I talk you through strategies for success. If you are going to do antibiotic therapy, how can you get the most benefit out of it? How can you have the most success with it? How can you avoid the problems that can arise with the different side effects of medications? So this module gives you a lot of protocol information, but it also gives you information of how to navigate doing antibiotic therapy for Lyme. So here's just some of this more detail that we go over in this module: antibiotic therapy for acute Lyme, protocols for acute Lyme, protocols for chronic Lyme, protocols for co-infections, protocols in pregnancy, and talking about antibiotic use in children, pros and cons of IV therapy and injectable medications, pulsing antibiotics, medication interactions, and also some great tips on what to do when antibiotics stop working. Different ideas of how you can kickstart the benefits again without having to jump ship on antibiotics altogether. And I do give you a medication dosage summary chart. Module 4 is the importance of detoxification and how to do it. Now, it was interesting to me in putting this program together that I started talking about the naturopathic approaches to chronic Lyme disease. And that was going to be the 4th module, and detoxification was going to be the 5th module. And then I realized, no, the detoxification has to come first. So I want you to understand, and I go into detail about why detoxification is so important. We look at what actually is detoxification. What is this phase 1 and this phase 2 thing that I hear about? What's the difference between detox and elimination? Is detoxification and a Herxheimer reaction the same thing? And 3 fundamentals of detoxification. I really have you in this module understanding the process of detox. I know the word is thrown around a lot in the Lyme world. I want you to understand the process, and that way you'll see how important this is. I talk about how to reduce incoming toxins. I mean, one way to help your body have less to detoxify is to screen the incoming toxins and reduce those. So I talk about different ways to do that. We talk about supporting detox through nutrition, supporting detox through supplementation, what herbs and nutrients, essential oils and homeopathics can help detox, and then supporting elimination of the toxins out of the body, which is a whole other issue and a whole other consideration. You can be detoxifying fine, but if you're not eliminating, then the toxins aren't getting out of the body, and that's only half the solution. Then I look at the home therapies that you can do to support detoxification and elimination. So examples here are skin brushing, Epsom salts baths, castor oil packs, far infrared sauna, ionic foot bath, and coffee enemas. I give you a putting it all together guide, where to start, some of my favorite detox drinks, and favorite detox products and protocol information. I try to always give very practical protocol information so that you've got some very tangible information that you can do something with right away. And I've put together a home therapies how-to guide. So those home therapies that are listed, I just mentioned above, there is a step-by-step guide of how to do each and every one of them. Module 5 then is the naturopathic treatment of Lyme disease. So here's where we get into the next steps of treatment. I talk about the treatment triad. So when we're looking at the actual treatment of Lyme disease itself, of the chronic infection piece, we've got supporting immune function, we've got managing inflammation, and we've got herbal antimicrobials. So I break it down into those distinctions of how you can support immune, how you can reduce inflammation, and how you can actually reduce the pathogen load using natural herbal remedies. We talk about biofilm agents there, and also treatments for what we consider opportunistic infections like chlamydia, pneumonia, mycoplasma species, viruses, and candida, which come up frequently in many, many Lyme patients. I also then go into how to manage symptoms, and there are lots of strategies for pain, mood, cognition, sleep, and energy, which are really 5 of the big ones that I hear. I talk about important micronutrients in Lyme disease. What are the vitamins and minerals that make a difference in Lyme and why? And then look at other therapies to consider. I talk about IV therapies. We mentioned some earlier, IV vitamin C, IV hydrogen peroxide, IV Myers cocktail. What's the difference between those? How would you know what might be good for you? I break it down, and so you understand what each and every one is doing. Oxygen therapies like hyperbaric oxygen and ozone. If you're doing hyperbaric, is a soft shell chamber enough, or do you need a hard shell chamber? What's the difference? And then frequency-based therapies such as Rife therapy, but I talk about a range of different frequency-based therapies as well. So I give you some guidance on getting kids to take herbs and supplements. For you parents who are working with your children and trying to help them, getting them to take stuff can be really tricky. So I give you some tips on that. Again, sample protocols, always protocols, so that you get practical information. And I walk you through a handful of case studies just so you can kind of see my thought process and a few examples of how each patient is individual and everybody needs to have their own plan based on their top priorities. Module 6 is dedicated to hormone regulation in Lyme disease. So I give you an overview of that. And then we go into balancing adrenal hormones, balancing thyroid hormones, and balancing reproductive hormones. Most people I work with, their hormones are all, up the creek. And so I go in detail, especially with adrenals, because it's so crucial to understand adrenal health and how that can impact everything else. Module 7 is committed to digestive issues in Lyme disease. So we look at 6 main causes of digestive disturbance, side effects of medications, coexisting GI infections such as H. pylori and parasites, inflammation caused by food allergens and gluten intolerance, disruption of normal flora in the gut. So there I'm talking about candida, SIBO, for example, and just bacterial overgrowth in the bowel, leaky gut, and then, of course, Borrelia and co-infections in the gut itself. And again, protocols so that you've got practical information. Module 8 is all about nutrition and Lyme disease. We talk about why dietary modifications are crucial for healing from Lyme, how to implement change without becoming overwhelmed. That's a big one for people who are just starting on the journey. Fundamentals of the Lyme diet, which is based on the principles of the book that I wrote, several years ago now, but I still am a firm believer in those principles. And then nutrition for reducing inflammation, supporting immune function, digestive support, hormonal support, supporting detox and elimination. I talk about nutrition for offsetting side effects of antibiotics. And then I give you an overview of other special diets to consider that you may have heard of and try and give you some tips of why might you choose this? What might make you a good candidate for that diet? And then I give you a Lyme diet action plan. So it's a 2-page simplified summary of the Lyme diet. And then it's about, I want to say it's like 35, 40 pages, this action plan. There's shopping lists, there's 7-day meal plans for people who have moderate carbs, there's 7-day meal plans for people who are low carb. There's recipes, there's breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack, and treat suggestions. Because every so often you just need a treat, right? But there's ways to make them healthy treats. And then I give you how-to guides, step by step, of how to make your own kefir, kombucha, and bone broth. So there's lots of resources in there. Module 9 goes through 10 things that can hold back recovery. And we talked about that tonight, like always being on alert for things that could hinder your recovery and get in the way. Untreated co-infections is a big one. Biofilm, heavy metals, methylation defects, pyroluria, parasites, mold toxicity, toxic environment, thought patterns, and a high-stress lifestyle. And I go through kind of what each one entails, give you some suggestions of how to test for it, and then give you some suggestions as well of what you might do to address those things. Module 10 is all about living with Lyme long-term. I often get asked questions about remission from Lyme and will I ever be back to how I was before, and is this something I have to live with for the rest of my life, and can we cure it, and will I improve? There are so many questions and so much uncertainty that comes in this Lyme journey. And so I have given you some information and some strategies for emotional healing. I've outlined the emotional freedom technique and the dynamic neural retraining system because they're two of my favorites, and because there are things that you can do in your own home. And I think that's important. But I do talk about the importance of emotional healing. And we touched on that in the webinar today. I just take that to a deeper level and then go into some detail on the couple of tools that could really help. I talk about what does recovery from Lyme disease look like? It's the $1 million question, and it will be different for everybody. But I think it's important that we talk about these things. I think there's, a lot of people are too frightened to look into that sort of murky quagmire. But I think it's important that we get realistic about, what does recovery look like? How possible is remission? What can I expect for the future? And of course, we don't have a crystal ball and we don't know all those answers, but I do bring up some of those questions in the lessons in this module because I do think it's important to talk about and just to bring to the surface. And then the reality of maintenance. So even in remission, what does that look like? What is a good maintenance plan? Is it realistic to expect all the symptoms to be gone? Or, is 90% recovery enough? What do we want to look for down the road? How can we stay well? All of those things I talk about in this module. And then I give you a couple of bonus lectures too, because these are topics that I'm very passionate about and very interested in. Rebuilding health using essential oils. And they're a way to use essential oils for symptom support, and they're a way to use essential oils to actually be part of your antimicrobial protocol. So I give you very clearly spelled out protocols in that lecture. And then talking about CBD and Lyme disease. A lot of people are using CBD and finding that it's helpful for pain and anxiety and inflammation and things like that. So I go into depth about cannabis, the difference between hemp and marijuana, and what is CBD and how is it working in the body, and what are some of the benefits that it can have. So you've got two bonus lectures there. So my goal here is to provide you with practical information you need to be able to incorporate more integrative approaches for your own care. I've put it all in one place in an easy to follow, intuitive, clearly laid out format. I've broken all the modules down into lessons that are no longer than 30 minutes, but usually more around 15 to 20. They're clearly labeled, clearly titled, so that you can just, either pick and choose the ones that are most relevant to you and start there, or start at the beginning and work your way through sequentially. That choice is yours, but they're all in little bite-sized packages of information that you can access, and you will have lifetime access once you purchase the course. I've also included how-to guides. Every module has downloadable notes PDF documents. So all the slides are available in a PDF document that you can download and print. And the lessons are broken down into small chunks, like I said, so as to not become overwhelming. There are protocols clearly outlined, including dosages, so you'll have practical information you can use right away. And I truly believe that you'll feel more empowered and more educated in your journey. Now, if you're already working with an integrative practitioner who'll be directing your treatment path, that's fantastic. I love that you're doing that. I would encourage everybody to find themselves a team of practitioners that they can work with on some of these strategies. But even if that's the case, I hope that you will glean lots of ideas you can incorporate at home at next to no cost. I realize this Lyme journey can be prohibitively expensive. And guess what? I also made the modules available individually. So if there's really one area that you want to focus on, you can simply select and purchase that individual module. So let me share the pricing with you. So the price of the course is $297, or it's available at 3 monthly payments of $99. And then individual modules are between 27 and 47 each. But because this is just brand new and I'm really excited to get it out there, I am offering a special introductory price of $197. So that's $100 off the regular price. And you can still do 3 payments to get to that as well. So even the $197 special price, I break down into 3 payments for you too. I also offer a 30-day money back guarantee. If you're not fully satisfied with the program and feel that it's provided great value for you, I'll issue you with a refund. I want you to be happy and feel that you've had great information and that you've learned from the program. So what are you waiting for? Lyme-ed.com is the website. I would love for you to join me there. I'm so excited about this program, and I've really put my heart and soul into it. I'm so dedicated to my patients, but I want to be able to reach more people as well. So I'm very excited to be releasing the Lyme Ed program. So just to give you a recap of what the program includes, it's 10 modules, everything you need to know about chronic Lyme disease, including both allopathic and naturopathic treatment approaches, home-based strategies, hormones, digestion, strategies for emotional recovery, and more. 2 bonus lectures on using essential oils in Lyme treatment and CBD in Lyme, lifetime access to all the video lessons, and downloadable PDFs of all the lesson notes. Like I said, I'm really passionate about helping people navigate the complexities of chronic Lyme. It breaks my heart to see what people have been through, and just knowing how difficult and how challenging an illness it is. I'm really moved and driven to help as many people as possible. So this program is a culmination of 15 years of experience working with Lyme disease, and these are all the strategies I use with my own patients. And my next project now is to turn my attention to a Lyme Ed program for practitioners, because we need more people who are knowledgeable and confident in treating chronic Lyme. I'm excited about what this program has to offer. I don't want you to miss out. So if you have any questions, please email support@nicoladucharme.com, and I'll see you on the inside of the course. Thank you so much for joining me for this webinar. It's been a great pleasure for me, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.